So welcome to the Node API team meeting for April 14th, 2023. We will follow our standard practice of looking at what we've got tagged with milestone 11 and going from there. Before we get started, any announcements or information news that people would like to share? If not, I do see last week, Nick, you commented that Node API headers was released, the V005s. Thanks for doing that, and it's good to get that out. On this front, I just thought it would be good to share with this team that we did land a PR in the Node project, which sort of formalizes the approach of having an issue in the team repos with news. And the next 10 team is gonna, after we get a few more teams sort of creating issues, seeing who's interested, we're gonna go out to some of the periodicals like Node Weekly and some of whatever other ones we can think of might make sense and say like, here's a place where you can find the list of issues where teams are sharing news, and if you want to help publicize them. So at some point in the future, we hope that, you know, this adding things to this issue might result in those being publicized or discussed in some of those other venues, just as a heads up. So let me flip over then to what we've got tagged for the agenda and share. Okay, I will share that there. And okay, let's go here. Okay, so first one is drive towards full coverage. We don't have Jack today, but I think I saw another PR that was related to testing. So I think there's ongoing progress, probably just needs some, let me go there and some review. We look in the pull requests. Yeah, there's adding the coverage for async progress worker. It was opened last week. So if anybody has some time to take a look, that would be great. So I don't think there's anything. Anybody else have anything on that one to add? No. Okay. The next one is adding a list of C language bindings to the Node doc.
I don't have news about this.
Okay. On to the next one. I haven't done anything on adding the debug testing for add-ons. This one, let's maybe just, we can move to the check-in on this one, the document how to check for memory leaks.
I have not had any time to look at this or review the comments.
Yeah, I think my main comment was it might make sense to actually integrate your new content into the existing doc in the Node repo.
Which existing doc?
I think I have, I'm pretty sure I linked that there. Where is it? So yeah, on the comment, I have a link. There's a doc which is on how to use Valgrind. And I think like, it doesn't overlap much with what you have here, right? Like most of what you have here is about, here's how you use Valgrind in a Node API specific context and like what the leaks are to expect. So I think this would actually be like a great addition to that doc in terms of, okay, now we've talked about the general thing, specifically when you're looking at add-ons, here's what you're going to see and here's how you exclude the reports that you're going to get.
Okay. I am just quickly looking at that doc. If you want to open it up, the markdown, it actually does seem to have a lot of stuff in common. It says, like it provides code that has a memory leak, and then it looks like they resolve it. But
it
I'll
doesn't
take some look to see what is overlapping and what is what's
like
not.
it certainly doesn't have this generating a Valgrind suppressing.
Oh yes, okay.
Right, like it kind of shows like in the generic how you would do it, but it doesn't have the I think like this doc you wrote started with the, well, when you use Valground on the extensions, it's going to tell you there's a memory leak, and
Right.
but it's not actually a memory leak. So actually like helping people understand that like, hey, these ones in particular are not a problem. They're always going to be there. And how do you suppress them? Which I think is most of the content in your
Right. It is.
doc here. So that's why I was saying, like, maybe this very first example of like how you use it, there's a little bit of an overlap. But once you get to this section here of like the leak
Right.
summary and explaining what's going on and how do you deal with it, like that's all new stuff.
Okay. Yeah. I'll take a look, and then
Okay.
I can create a PR.
Because I think our last time the biggest question was like, where should it go? But in my mind, that's a great place for it to go. And
Makes sense.
okay. I'm just looking to see if like maybe some of the easier ones. Shenzong, getting contacts for each of the runtime supporting Node API. Anything worth discussing on that one?
Not yet. We don't have any progress in the last weeks.
Okay.
Do you think there is any runtimes we should reach out to?
I think you covered, like, I think you covered the ones, like, I'm trying to remember, but I think we discussed the different ones and we thought that you were covering all the ones that were important. So it might be like at some point, if you've reached out to them and there's just no response, we've just got to decide, well, we did our best, right? And we can't force people to be interested, but if we've given them the opportunity and then we document it, we can, share with the people, like, there's somebody from Bun who showed some interest. And I think you talked to some people at Dino who showed some interest, so we could add them and then, leave it at that for now.
Yeah, people from Dino has already joined the team. So I think probably we can create a document on how to join the team, so
Okay.
that we can close this issue.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Could you join me in?
Yeah,
in the
definitely.
meeting? Yeah, thank you.
Also, I think it is worthwhile to mention what issues we will mention the implementers team, so that there is an indicator that is set, like say the TR make significant changes to the Node API, need to mention the implementer team.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will summarize. I will create a summary in the document together with how to join the team too.
Yeah, that's good. And I think we could even, like, we do have a document somewhere that talks about like new APIs and requirements for them. And we should probably add to that. One of the requirements is an app mention, not only to the Node API team, but to that team as well.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll create the document first.
Yep, sounds perfect. Okay, thanks. Just looking at before we get into like specific issues, I think the last one, I created this just yesterday. The security working group is working on looking at projects and like repos and the OSSF scorecard. And I just noticed that in that review that, like, the scorecard was there for some of our repos. And there were some things that we could probably talk about in terms of the results, like branch protection. Should we just turn on branch protection and all that? There's even a tool which like from Step Security that actually will go and create a PR. So I went and did that on add-on API. So basically, this was like an automatically created PR, which I asked for, and it applies a bunch of that guidance. So I don't want to review it. I know it's probably more than we should like try and consume in the meeting itself, but I just put it on the agenda to kind of explain where this came from, get people thinking about it. And, if you can think about that, maybe we can discuss next week whether we think doing these things makes sense or not, and so forth. Any other kind of questions on that one for this week?
Actually, the PR's action, GitHub action is failing, and it's not add-on API's PR.
Right.
Yeah, the security advisor's PR.
Yeah.
I just found in the action code that it mentioned we need to take actions to modify the build steps so that to get this action script working.
Okay. We're unable to build your code, right? Interesting.
Yeah, it probably doesn't know what it needs to do to build.
We can definitely like, it's not an all or nothing either, right? Like I can go back and this was like a checkbox. I can uncheckbox this one as well. So that might make sense. But it'd be interesting to understand this and see, like, can we get it to build and give us some feedback as well automatically?
Yeah, good to see improvements on this.
Okay, so yeah, I just was like wanted to put it in people's mind, and maybe next week we can sort of discuss it more in detail once people have had a time to kind of think about it. There's probably a reasonable amount to look at. But yeah, no, it's interesting, like that one fails and we could figure out, does it make any sense for us in terms of figuring out how to build or not? Okay, I think then maybe that's all the sort of individual things. Unless I missed something, we could go to the stale issues. Let me go down to the bottom. So this one, I think, Kevin, we're really waiting on
They merged some update in the in the underlying native library as well as the native module. I think this can be closed. I think we can ask them if this issue has been resolved now.
Okay. So there was this last comment was like, no, this bug still exists.
Right. But then they did merge some changes since then.
Okay. Okay. What am I gonna say? Comment that. I guess the question too is, like, it really seemed like it wasn't an issue in Node add-on API, right?
Correct.
So I'm wondering if we should just take it off our stale issues. Or
Sure.
or should we leave it in? Like, I think it's kind of like, there's no point necessarily us asking about it here or discussing it because turns
Right.
out you've done enough work to help them where we don't think it's a Node API issue anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay, so I'm going to delete that and we can always re-add it in if it's, this one, I think maybe, did I hide that for a reason or is it done, right? Yeah, so that's close. I think I probably meant to delete it, but I'll just.
That's the wrong comment.
Okay, yes, thank you. This one,
Yes.
yeah. Okay. Anyway, okay. This one on the feature bits. So I know these two that there's the PR that Vladimir's working on is the next step on that. Anything we should discuss on that front this week?
You talk about this PR?
Right. I think like the next step was the
Right.
the feature
yeah.
bits was you had the PR. Is there anything like, is it progressing? Does it need reviews or is there anything we should chat about?
Last week, Gabriel gave very good comments. I addressed them today morning. So thankfully, also today I have updated documentation. So if pretty much it's ready. One thing I would like to discuss with the group, because as a part of this version, we also changed the behavior of this NAPI ref, and now we can reference all value types. I want to make sure that we're on the same page. What happens to this value types, then reference count goes to 0. Because if it's not object type will become weak reference, right? But if it's not object type, it still remains a strong reference. I want us to make sure that it's behavior we expect.
So when it goes to 0?
Yes.
And then.
So we can have two different strategies. When
Yeah.
count goes to 0, for example, object references become weak references. Other value types become like we can make them, we can delete them immediately.
Right.
But default behavior as V8 behaves, like if we don't have any kind of conditional code, default behavior, then ref count goes to 0. Currently, that because we can't make them weak references, like say you have a string, we can have a weak reference to a string. So this string will still have strong reference effectively. And its current behavior for symbols, as you know, like a NAPI ref was implemented with symbols before, and symbols don't support weak references as well. So then ref count goes to 0 for symbols still alive.
And we're still holding them alive, is that right?
Right. So the only way to delete kind of reference to symbol, actually delete the whole reference. It's not enough just to put reference count to 0.
Yeah, that seems odd.
But as we discussed before,
the reference count doesn't really help at all then, right? Like.
Yeah, but in JavaScript, as far as I know, like Cheng Zhong said last time, and Gabriel implemented that the never ref count goes to 0, we're actually deleting them in JavaScript. But in Node, we don't delete them.
Right, like deleting the actual reference itself, right?
Right.
So, I mean, if the ref count goes to 0, right, then we can pretend that the reference has become weak and that it has gone immediately out of scope, right? And that would be deleting it, right? Because that's what happens on the engine side, right? If nobody uses it anymore, right? Because like the engine also has a reference to the string, right?
Right, but the way it works in V8 only supports weak references to objects. So if you're asking for weak reference to string, because they don't have concept of weak reference to string, it actually remains just strong reference.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess we won't know when it is actually garbage collected, right? V8 doesn't tell us when a primitive is garbage collected because it doesn't have a weak callback, right?
No, distinctly, like, I would say they don't implement weak reference for kind of primitive types. So if you're asking for weak reference to primitive type, it's still strong reference.
Right, but so,
But yeah, if they're collecting it, you're right, we will not have any notification.
but I think like our reference, I think like, yeah, I think if we don't have a weak reference, we should delete our reference and have it be, because like as soon as it gets to 0 for the types that do have a weak reference, it's possible that it could be immediately collected and go out of scope, right? We've just made it such that if it can stick around, yeah. Because otherwise we basically hold a reference open forever, right? And what is the reference counting really doing for you?
Yeah, it's become
Right, because you have to
become
delete the
rather
reference yourself. Like, I guess it's,
At that point, it becomes just like regular C memory management. You just have to pass the string back into like a native binding and say, please delete the reference to this string. Because you don't have, like, the engine doesn't notify you that the string has gone out of scope, right? So you basically have to substitute that notification with an explicit call from the JavaScript side to the native side saying, this string has gone out of scope. I'm not going to use it anymore. So please delete it. So that's just like malloc and free. You tell the memory manager that you're not going to use this chunk anymore. There is no automatic notification that this chunk won't be used anymore. So it's at that point, the point of a reference isn't really very strong anymore, because the point of reference is that you are tying the native memory management to the engine's memory management, right? And so the engine tells you, you should free this because it will never be used anymore. But if the engine doesn't tell you that, then somebody has to tell you that.
Another point is, let's say we do have another strong dependencies on this feature in the Node add-on API for the error handling references, since we can throw arbitrary JavaScript values as exception, and whilst currently we model all exception value as the error reference. So to achieve the C++ exception handling without handle scope escaping, so a reference is necessary here to keep the handle alive across the handle scopes without explicit escaping, since it's not possible in C++ exception handling. Yeah, that's the reason, one of the good reasons we push forward with this without the weak callback semantics for primitive values.
So in the case of Node add-on API, we have a very strong and well-defined lifetime for these references, right? The beginning of the lifetime is when it gets thrown, and the end of the lifetime is when we send it to JavaScript, right? So we will always explicitly delete the reference just before returning to JavaScript. So our use case is clear. But if anybody ends up using this, since it's now in Node Core, anybody can use it for any reason, right? Then they also have to delete the reference. Who knows when? They have to think very hard about the life cycle of this reference.
So
Right.
there is the
Uh,
choice, like when you create it, there's the choice to say auto delete or don't auto delete, right?
Oh no, like references must be, or if you creating reference explicitly, you always must delete it explicitly. It's only
Okay.
for finalizer. It's, for example, the creating finalizer, and you can actually say, I would like to have a reference. If you get explicit reference, again, you're responsible for deleting it. But if you didn't get reference back, then this reference will be deleted for you. But it's kind of a bit different case. You kind of creating weak reference up front. And
Yeah, so
finalize
a reference to a primitive value doesn't make sense without accepting a reference back, right? Because it will be deleted. Well, no, I guess it does make sense because it can still be deleted for you, right? If the ref count reaches 0.
Yeah, we can't create
yeah.
we can't create a reference to primitive value without getting the reference back.
Oh no, you're right, because then how do you manage the ref count, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, never mind. Yeah, so at that point, so at that point, you might as well call delete reference, because if you say nappy reference unref, then how do you know that you're supposed to unref? Somebody from JavaScript told you you're supposed to unref, right? Because the engine isn't going to tell you anything. And so at that point, you know, it's just like passing a pointer into, you might as well use an external with no finalizer and no anything, and just pass the pointer in, and you get the pointer back, and the JavaScript layer tells you when you're supposed to delete it, because you don't know. So at that point, it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of pointless to have a reference, you know?
Yeah, a reference needed, like imagine I want to create a kind of name table. Like I want to, one kind of function which we want to add is maybe atomized strings, for example. And I want to keep my most often used strings in my add-on in some kind of special table. In this case, I would like to keep this reference to string, even if it's like a stack been unwinded several times, so I can keep them in my structure. Today, it's not possible to keep strings at all. Right? It's the only way we keep in strings, for example, for errors. We create a special fake object, and we put in string as a property inside of this object. So we have to go through several hoops to keep some primitive types.
Right, but but you know when you're supposed to clean up the string table, right? Like
yes. So technically, what I'm saying that currently, as the code written today, it works. I just wanted us to be agreed on the semantic. Like, are we okay if a reference counter for primitive types goes to 0, but if primitive types still alive? Because it's a bit different from implementation you've done for JavaScript. In JavaScript, as soon as ref count goes to 0, even for objects, you're deleting them. So you, as a creator of one of these Node API implementations for different engines,
yeah, I think that's because JavaScript only has strong references. Like you can, like if you, it doesn't have weak references. So then the ref count going to 0 is kind of simulating a weak reference that is immediately garbage collected. I think that's, if I remember correctly, that's how it was. So
that what's the analog in our case? Like for these for the types that don't have a weak reference, do we end up keeping them alive?
yeah, currently, the only non-object type we support today are symbols. And we're keeping symbols alive today if ref count goes to 0. But this PR adds other primitive types, and we're saying we're changing behavior as we kind of move into newer version of Node API. So I just want us to make some decision which way we want to go.
Like keeping them alive seems to me to be confusing, right? Like even if you have to delete the C structure itself, the contract for everything else is like, if it hits 0, we will not keep it alive, right? It will, if it can be collected, it can be collected. And so it seems wrong to me that if it hits 0, we keep it alive. And if the consequence is that we have to treat it like it's immediately collected, even if it's not, we should still do that to make sure that we don't keep it alive.
Yeah, I
Right? Like
personally
if you want to keep it alive, make sure that the reference count doesn't go to 0, right?
Right. I personally agree with you. My preference would be here if reference count goes to 0, of these primitive types must be deleted, and if type supports a weak pointer semantic, then it becomes weak pointer.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't support weak pointer semantic, it must be deleted.
Yes.
So my opinion, it will be more consistent, but it's a bit, but it means like also be a bit break and change, for example, for symbols.
Right, but I think hopefully we agreed that like that would be like as we move to Node API 9 or 10 or whatever, that's the kind of change we were hoping to enable, I think.
And I don't necessarily think it's a breaking change, because you know, if you've attached a finalizer to a symbol, then you expect that finalizer to be called at some point, right? If today that finalizer is never called, that's a bug, I would think, because then your native data is never freed, right? So for symbols, can we not say that this is a bug fix? Because, you know, it wasn't getting called before, and there was no documentation saying that it's never going to get called, right?
I think we cannot attach finalizer to symbols. So I may be wrong. I believe not. But you're right. We didn't describe it anywhere explicitly. We only have one test which kind of testing this behavior. We have this kind of NAPI reference test where all this new symbol behavior been added, and then I try to kind of change it. This test is going to start to fail.
Yeah, I think Gabriel's point too, that like we could even consider that fixing a bug that we just haven't had reported, in terms of like, I think that along with the, hey, if we do it in a new Node API version, I suspect there won't be too many. There shouldn't be a lot of code out there that gets broken by that either. Hopefully.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, but otherwise, PR is ready. Like I addressed all Gabriel's suggestions. Thank you. He suggested to merge two different tests into one. It was really kind of nice, kind of satisfying doing it. And also, instead of using NAPI prefix, I'm kind of change all new APIs using Node API prefix. So it's like
okay. So is your question is separate? Like is that behavior change in the PR, or is that separate from that PR?
It's not there, because just one thing I done today morning, I tried to update documentation, and I realized that while I was writing this documentation, that we better kind of clarify exactly this behavior for primitive types. What we do when ref count goes to 0, because we talk about behavior for object types, but I felt like there is a gap in stuff. That's why I'm bringing this question to this forum.
Okay.
But it's something that should be easy to fix. I should be ready in the next day or two.
Okay, so the next step on that one should be ready. If people can go take a look, a review, then okay, sounds good.
Okay, thanks.
So welcome, Jack. I just since you've joined, we did go over the item that was related to the test coverage, but I thought, is there anything you'd like to bring up or discuss on that today?
No, I think just the test PR, and the last one I can probably get it done this weekend. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we saw there's one more for people to review, so try and get to that.
Thank you.
Okay, this one was just about adding an example. The documentation landed, so this one we just didn't close because it would be good to add an example. But anything on these two we want to chat about?
No progress on this yet, but I noticed Gabriel submitted a PR to the node.js API repo on the about the as a function inside a object wrap. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'd like to know if Gabriel is, like say, working on this.
Yeah. So let's see. So I am working on this example where you have a thread safe function inside an object wrap, and one thing that I noticed that we probably need to fix is we need to extend this swallow unthrowable errors to all the code paths inside error, like when we construct an error, because what I found was that when a worker thread shuts down, the able to execute JavaScript flag, so the can call into JS flag, can become false at any time, like even if you're in the middle of a node API call. So because the way it's implemented is it's just an atomic Boolean inside the environment, right? And so the main thread just sets the Boolean and that's it. And if you're in the middle of a node API call, you could be in the middle of NAPI preamble and all of a sudden you cannot execute JavaScript anymore. So any call that we make could all of a sudden return pending exception. And we are handling some of that stuff in node.js API, but not all of it. For example, if the thrown value is a primitive, then we do this wrapping into an object, right? So that we can throw it as an exception. But that, for example, an API defined properties that we call to set this one property can return a NAPI pending exception. And when it does, then we currently turn that into a fatal error. So I think that's another candidate for wrapping it in this swallow unthrowable errors, because it's down the same path as the other case that we have. And in general, I think for the purposes of an API in general, I think we've got this problem where you pretty much have to be prepared to handle this pending exception anywhere in your code, really, because if you're inside a worker thread and the worker thread is shutting down, then an API call whatsoever can throw this. I mean, obviously, it's only the ones that call into JavaScript, but you have to be prepared for that. So that's pretty dicey, honestly.
I guess it's more though, like the API is already like after each call, you can have an exception which you should check, right?
Yeah,
the problem is if our wrapper ends up with a fatal exception instead of having checked it and handled it more gracefully, I can see that being an issue.
Exactly. Yeah. It shouldn't fatal, because like node.js API, one of its values is that it seeks to automate this exception handling, right? And so you don't need to deal with all those return statuses. But as a result, we take on the responsibility of handling these exceptions. And we have managed to not handle it fatally in one case, but there are many other cases where we do that. Thankfully, the whole thing is precipitated by that initial API pending exception error that it returns. So we know exactly whether the environment is shutting down or not. We just need to handle every last case that is down that particular branch. And so, yeah, I don't know. I'll probably have a PR for that, because I have this example in like its own repo, and it fails fatally less and less as I refine it.
Well, that's good. So the example's been helping you improve as well. The code.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that bit of feedback, and it's really it's very hard to test because it just happens randomly. So I run the code like in a bash while loop, and it succeeds like 256 times and then it fails. But I think that's the reason. And so I'm just going to comb through the code and find all the places where we call into an API on that error path, and just wrap those in this swallow unthrowable exceptions bit, and hopefully it'll succeed every time. Though what we do with the initial exception, I'm not sure. In fact, for Vladimir's PR, once that lands, I think it would be a good idea to use this new feature bit implementation to add this cannot call into JS thing in like the next version of an API, because it's kind of no longer Semver Major at that point, right? Because like you said, we're kind of pushing the burden of maintenance onto add-on owners, but only if they choose to make use of the shiny new features in later versions of Node API, right? Mm-hmm. So yes, you want the shiny new features, fine, but you also gotta clean up your base, to line up with what happened upstream. So this is a great mechanism for pushing fixes forward, and I think this is one of them. Is we should have this cannot call into JS status, because right now it's mechanisms are emerging for detecting just that, which is that the environment is shutting down and you cannot call into JS anymore. And there is another thing that we potentially need to deal with, which is the distinction between the environment is shutting down and cannot call into JS, because currently the two are synonymous. The only time you can no longer call into JS is when the environment is shutting down, right? But there is nothing to say that cannot call into JS cannot be true temporarily, and then once more you can call into JS. That just happens not to be the case today. But cannot call into JS should not be synonymous with the environment is shutting down. So that may actually warrant two separate statuses. So these are things that we may want to look into once Vladimir's PR lands, because I think that's a great value to have this sort of mechanism.
Yeah, actually, in the core, the two flags are not distinguishable at the moment. So yeah, we probably need to discuss more about these two flags in the core too, since the Node.js core doesn't distinguish very much of the two flags.
That's what I noticed too. So yeah, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, can call into JS is only ever false. It is always true except when the environment is shutting down, and then it becomes false and it never becomes true again, right? That is currently so in that case, the cannot call into JS is currently synonymous with environment is shutting down. So I think environment is shutting down is the more precise definition currently. So if we do implement a flag, I think we should call it environment is shutting down. And then, we detect that using cannot call into JS, but the mechanism by which we detect it can change later. If cannot call into JS becomes a real thing of its own, which can temporarily become true, then we'll just have to figure out, we have this is stopping, right? So then we can just say if is stopping, then just return environment is shutting down. And then that's it, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to starting with, since the cannot call into JS, currently the flag cannot call into JS can be very confusing, since when you create a isolate disallow JavaScript execution scope, it doesn't set the cannot call into JavaScript flag, since it's a Node.js thing. It's not a V8 thing, so exactly. It can be confusing.
Yeah. Oh, and there is another thing. Environment is shutting down is like a superset of cannot call into JS, because environment is shutting down implies cannot call into JS, but cannot call into JS does not imply that the environment is shutting down. So that's why I think we should start with environment is shutting down, and then later, if necessary, add cannot call into JS, because that is a more precise indication, right? And currently there's no point in adding cannot call into JS because it's always the same as environment is shutting down. But anyway, those are just some thoughts.
We have scenario actually, Gabriel. We discussed some times ago. Like, remember, we want to change this behavior finalizers.
Yeah.
Finalizers can't really run only as a set immediately in a queue. But if we want to run them immediately, we want to prohibit people running JS code. So this way, like this case, this flag will be extremely useful for people.
Right. Yeah. So, okay, but we would, well, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, for so for these like pure finalizers, yeah. So if they call into JS from a pure finalizer, then they will get this flag back, right?
Actually, it's still a little bit different, since in the pure finalizer you cannot access the heap instead of calling into JS, since that will be a superset of calling into JS flag, since you cannot create an object, but a create object doesn't call into JS.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's even stricter than that. You pretty much cannot do anything from a pure finalizer.
Only deleting your native pointers.
Yeah. Okay, I see. So it naively I would almost say like, okay, then create a second type of finalizer which does not receive the env, as a or receives null for the NAPI env, and then you have no choice but to stick to your native side, and we have precedent for that, right? The thread safe function JS callback receives null for the environment and for the JS, for the NAPI value holding the JS function when the environment is shutting down and you need to drain the queue, right? So the idea that a function receives null for the environment is not new in Node.js core. So if and when we start thinking about these pure finalizers, or if and when we start implementing these, then passing null for the environment may be a choice given this precedent.
So I would not like to pass null for one simple reason. Like if people want to run JavaScript, we need to give them ability to call set immediate effectively. We must be able to give them way to schedule kind of finalization is a kind of next tick in the queue. So technically, they in kind of this pure finalizers, they can clean up any code, or they can actually schedule something to be run as a kind of next tick inside of a queue, kind of thread.
So, well, yeah, yeah. I don't know if that's such good API though, right? Because like we're doing that, right? We're doing that for them at this point, right? And so we kind of want to ask them like, do you want us to do this, or are you okay with like not calling it to JavaScript, right? So if let's say we create a new API that says like, I don't know, a node API add pure finalizer, right? Then we can document that this finalizer will be run immediately, but you cannot use any NAPI function, right? And then we have whatever we have today, and then those are always set immediate, right? Is that not a good choice to set it up that way?
You mean like, technically what we're saying, we can't access JavaScript, but I would assume that scheduling next set immediate, it's node call. Effectively, we shouldn't kind of prohibit it, right?
I think Gabriel's kind of saying like either you can or you can't, right? Like being able to say, well, I want to run JavaScript deferred is kind of like saying I want to run JavaScript. So if the whole point of the API is that you can't run JavaScript, maybe just saying, well, you can't run it at all is the right answer, but
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, just
we do-
think about like a callback that just has one void star pointer, and that's it, right? That's a pure finalizer. It's like, here's your pointer, do what you need to do with it, right? And there's no env, there's nothing, and so that's a pure finalizer. And so, you know, you have an API that says node API add pure finalizer, and then you just add this callback that just has a void star, and that's it. And then you can either you could either NAPI add finalizer or use whatever finalizers we have now, or you can call this new API, and then it is absolutely clear that you cannot call into JavaScript, nor can you do anything with the engine because there is no end, right? And so the add-on maintainer decides which one they want, right? And they understand the semantics that, you know, if you want to call into JavaScript, then, you know, your call will be delayed, and it has these negative implications. If you create these objects in a synchronous loop, then, you know, they'll just keep piling up, even though the JavaScript side gets freed.
So we mentioned one of the good kind of recommendations. I think then we want to support multiple modules, I guess, in the same DLL. What our suggestion actually using this instance data, right? Like we can associate some our kind of C++ class with some instance data for this NAPI environment, right?
Yeah.
So we can retrieve at any point. So effectively, if we don't pass to finalizers NAPI environment at all, we're not even able to grab our object state.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Environment as well.
Yeah.
We're kind of running out of time. And I think we're pretty far down the designing the next API. So maybe we should take that offline or in an issue, and we can spend the last 4 minutes. Is there any issues that we think we should like either in the Node add-on API or Node repo that we should talk about?
I want to know only if I can make the new release for Node add-on API. So I will make in tomorrow, for example, and the version will be,
Go ahead.
the version will be 6.1.0. Is it right? Because
We're
it's
currently on 6, is it?
Yeah, because I think that we only
Right.
add minor
The only question might be, do we want to wait? Well, no, I think it'd be good to do this one, and then after the end of April, we should plan a 7, which drops support for Node 14.
Yeah, so this is
yeah.
the last release that support Node 14, and then after April, we can release a new version.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, and I have a question about node headers.
Okay.
The next release will be 1.0.0. Is it right? We discussed this in an issue that now is closed. Yeah, it's issue 25. And now, we have a paracast. So if you take a look at this paracast, I can merge the document, what is documented here, and I can make the first stable release for this package.
Yeah, makes sense to me.
So the question was that this package has a version different from Node API because this package has it's our API, JavaScript API. And so if we maintain two different the version of this package different to the node API version, we can be more flexible on handle the what is in this repo.
Right, like for example,
Yeah, the
if
symbols
we change
or
the format of the symbols, we
yeah,
might make it a breaking change, right?
yeah.
So yeah, yeah, but it's like no, that makes total sense. Like we don't just have the copy from core. It's the extra stuff that might break or might not. So
Okay, so when the paragraphs from Lucas is ready to be merged, I will make the new release.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
sounds
We
good.
will need to publish a version v1.0.0 change to indicate the package is stable.
Okay.
Okay, any other things we should discuss? I think we're at time. So if that's it, thanks for everybody's time, and we will see everybody next week.
See you. Thank you.
Talk to you
Bye.
later.
See you.
Bye.
Bye bye.